Shall it be a lie, or shall it be a truth? Glad you're here. We have the Zulu Empire Lies by Extra History. Not sure why I'm doing this intro this way. Now, guys, we have done the 4-part series of the great, illustrious Zulu Empire by Extra History, where we understood the origins, the demise, and everything in between. Of course, what Lies is, if you're new into the Extra History universe, it is simply things that they're correcting. It's become its own episode continuously. It's interesting. It's like their process is created to oversimplify, and then this is like to gap fill. If that makes sense. If it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you. Let's jump right in. Glad you're here.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Lies, the bit of extra history where I get to gab
Is it blurry or is he blurry? It's only 720, okay.
about all the things that we didn't have time to include, and fess up to all the things we got wrong. As always, we struggled a bit with pronunciation. Mfecane should be Mfecane, not Mfecane. Actually, that's even wrong. The C should be a clicking noise, which I literally cannot make, no matter how long I've sit here trying to practice it. So just know we got that wrong, 100% my fault. Boer should be boor and not bore. And I think we probably screwed up a ton of other stuff. I'm sorry, we tried as best we could. We looked up stuff wherever we could, and we still got it wrong. Then there's the outright lies, which I think we only did one of. If you're watching really carefully, you'll notice that in episode 3 at about the 50-second mark, we're using the Dutch flag that we used throughout the whole piece. But at that particular time...
Was it was it orange?
We're talking about the Dutch in 1652. So the blue bar in the flag should be a lot lighter, and the red bar should maybe be orange.
Yeah.
The dark blue came in after the French took over because during the French Revolution, they wanted to make the French flag and the Dutch flag more similar. And while the official flag of the Dutch Republic used red, many people, especially in South Africa, flew what is known as the Prince's flag, which originated when the House of Orange rose up in rebellion against the Spanish Habsburgs. And
that's what I imagined it to be too, yeah.
So they had an orange stripe instead of the red one.
Okay.
That flag was considered a symbol of Dutch nationalism and thus outlawed by the French, and so the flag you see throughout this thing. But you can see how long it took me to explain that, and we decided it would be too confusing to show a flag we'd never shown before without any context for one single image.
You should have.
So we didn't. My fault. And lastly, this one is actually bad. I wrote the Battle of Bloody River instead of the Battle of Blood River and never caught it. And this is important because the Battle of Blood River actually plays a huge part in the cultural history of South Africa. Because before the Battle of Blood River, the Boer commandos made a vow that if God would grant them victory, they and all future generations would celebrate the day as a holy day, and they would build a church in honor of that vow. This sort of grew into a legend, and some later Boers used it to support the idea that God had granted them South Africa. This, of course...
That's a lot. You see that a lot of times, is like when circumstances go your way, it's because God allowed it, and or in the inverse, God disapproved it.
First became mixed with racial segregation and was used by some as a justification for apartheid. This, though, actually ends on a more positive ending because now the day is celebrated as the Day of Reconciliation and intended to foster unity than continue long-standing divides. I also want to give a clarification. We refer to the Dutch who moved inland as Boers rather than voortrekkers, because that's what they would have called themselves. Voortrekker is actually a later term, which means the people who first moved, which of course the people moving at the time didn't call themselves. And on another note, you've probably heard De Beers ads for diamonds. They were founded in that diamond rush we talked about. And if you want to talk about monopolies and shady business dealings, you should dive down that rabbit hole. They took a very active role in the Boer War, tried to evade U.S. monopoly laws.
So they were the Standard Oil of the diamond industry. That's what I'm hearing.
They invented the phrase, diamonds are forever. I mean, heck, the reason that we think of diamonds when we think of wedding and engagement rings is actually solely because of De Beers marketing.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And that reminds me, A couple of clarifications I want to do for this series. In the first episode, the few people got confused about how the Zulus got maize, as it's not a local crop. Europeans brought it over in the 1600s, but by the time our story starts, basically the whole Zulu economy had switched over to maize because
That would have given at least 200 years at that point.
it's a much more efficient crop.
Yeah.
Which was great. But it's also much more water intensive than the local plants. So when the drought hit, destabilization plus. Also, a lot of people wondered about slavery and its role in these events. And truth is, while it's indubitably an important and terrible part of South African history, it didn't have a huge impact on the events that we're talking about. I guess I'm going to dive in a little bit more in depth here because it's something we should talk about, and the slave trade is actually probably something we should eventually do a whole series on. But when I think of slave trade in Africa, and usually I think when we talk about the slave trade in Africa,
It's the western side, not the eastern, which was where we primarily were.
what we're really talking about is something called the triangle trade.
Yeah.
This was a system where manufactured goods from Europe were brought to the west coast of Africa to trade for slaves, which were then exchanged for, in the Americas, for raw materials to bring back to Europe.
And this was a profit margin of like unseen profit margins.
And tragic truth is that it was much more convenient to ship people from coastal West Africa to the Americas than it was to go all the way to South
Yeah, I mean, logistically, yeah.
Africa. So that's where the vast majority of the slave trade occurred, in West Africa. Some slaves were exported from South Africa to the Asian and Pacific islands, but
I don't know too much about that. That's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know too much about that.
surprisingly, so far as I can tell, it looks like South Africa was actually more of an importer of slaves. As South Africa was more of a true colony with people moving in and settling and setting up farms than many of the other African nations, there was a greater need for cheap labor internally. And the Dutch East India Company outlawed the taking of local slaves, which meant that South Africa largely imported its slave population. So despite slavery being a huge, important part of South African history, it doesn't have too much of a direct impact on our story. The one area it actually does come in is the fact that shortly after the British took over, they abolished slavery, which was one of the complaints
I can't remember when that happened. Was that 1832?
the Dutch settlers had, which caused them to try and move out beyond British control. Okay, so now that we've taken care of the heavy stuff, let's get on to some trivia. First off, in episode 4, when an eclipse occurred at the height of the battle,
I was like, what?
that really happened.
That's crazy.
You'd be surprised how many of these tiny things that are in these episodes are actually part of the historical record.
It's like an omen.
That's not to say you shouldn't double check me on this stuff, because one of the reasons we do this episode is to point out that it's imperative that we learn from history, but that no single historical account is ever going to be the total truth. You should always get a second viewpoint. But where I have them, I try and throw in tiny neat details. Next, did you know Lord Carnarvon was known as Twitters because he was so twitchy? It doesn't seem like he got a lot of respect. Also, most of the pictures we have of Cetshwayo are of him in a business suit. This
Is that when he was in London?
is, of course, because while a few pictures are taken of him while he was in Africa, many more were taken of him when he went to England.
Yeah.
Oh, and remember how this whole thing was sort of kicked off by the French taking over the Netherlands during the French Revolution?
Yes.
Well, in an odd twist of fate, the last real heir to the House of Bonaparte and to the French throne was actually killed by the Zulus in the Anglo-Zulu War. Napoleon IV was living in quasi-exile in England after the disastrous Franco-Prussian War, which ended the Second French Empire.
We're talking like 70s, 1870s.
And he actually held a largely honorary post in the English army. But when the Anglo-Zulu War broke out, he pressured the British government to let him join. With many reservations, the government of England finally said, okay, you can go, but gave special instructions to Chelmsford to make sure that Bonaparte survived the conflict. He didn't. He died on a scouting mission he shouldn't have even been on, where he sort of commandeered the command. And
Commandeered. Basically, he tried to take over, which is right in his bloodline.
all of Europe was shocked. This was the last hope for a restoration of the Bonapartist monarchy, and here it was by the...
It was on... I don't know, man. 1870s France. I don't know, man. Maybe.
this African tribe snuffed out. Or there's a great quote from the words of the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. He said upon hearing this, he said of the Zulus that they are a very remarkable people, the Zulus. They defeat our generals, they convert our bishops, and they have settled the fate of a great European dynasty.
Wow.
Oh, and a number of people question
crazy.
why
That's a crazy tidbit right there.
the Zulu Empire is called an empire if it's only the size of New Jersey.
Yeah.
We've come to use the term empire broadly to mean any big thing from a business empire to a political one.
Right.
But usually, when I hear it, it's a little more formally defined as
Kingdom?
any ethnically or linguistically diverse groups ruled by a central authority.
Oh, you're talking about what an empire is.
You can also add, without the ability to opt out of that rulership, to separate it from a confederation. But under that definition, the Zulu Empire is definitely an empire, and that's what's going on most of the time when you hear small territories referred to as empires. Either that or their monarchs simply declared themselves an emperor.
Okay.
All right, I'm trying to keep this a lot shorter than last time. I know I went overboard with the Walpole facts. And actually, there's a few more I wanted to throw in this one, but there's one other big thing which I really wanted to address, so we'll skip those and we'll talk about the question of bullhorn tactics. Many people ask how it was possible that what seems like basic military tactics to us could be an innovation in the 19th century. Here's how I see it. Low-harm warfare is actually fairly common in societies with pre-Bronze Age economic output, and this makes a lot of sense. When your society is functioning basically on subsistence level, and food production is a massively labor-intensive work, you don't want to suddenly drastically reduce your workforce. And in places where the odds of surviving to adulthood were comparatively low, it could be disastrous if you just wiped out a large segment of your adult men over some minor land dispute.
Yeah.
In fact, in these societies, the additional labor force was actually probably more valuable than the land. This means that such societies aren't really motivated to create violent, intensive forms of warfare.
Yeah, and it makes sense because in the beginning of this series, it was really almost like Persian Empire tactics where it's just brute force.
And it's probably up for debate as to whether or not they had the excess labor capacity to dedicate time and energy to sort of the drill required for even the most rudimentary tactics. But with the introduction of European crops and the additional economic driver of European trade, the indigenous people of South Africa suddenly came to have a population surplus. And when you have that type of surplus, the land value and the value of goods goes up. And unfortunately, the value of lives goes down. And this means that you could finally dedicate more time to drill and military structure. And it meant finally they had a reason to really fight over territory. After all, territory just isn't as valuable if you don't have the people to work it. Which, to me, inevitably leads to the creation of tactics. But that's just how I read it. It's awesome people are asking, though, as working through the whys, even if we don't always have the answer, is, to me, one of the most important parts of history. One other thing I forgot to mention, and then I promise I'll wrap this up, but I've got to talk about our musicians. A few weeks ago, we put up our next Patreon stretch goal, getting musicians for the show, which I was super excited about. But what was amazing is shortly after we put it up, we got an email from two brothers who had worked on Hell on Wheels and Clone Wars TV show and a bunch of stuff. And they just offered to make music for the show until we crossed the Patreon threshold.
That's really cool.
So I want to give a big thanks to Sean and Dean Kinner. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. I might have butchered your names. I'm sorry. I look forward to the day we can pay you guys what you're worth. But I should wrap this up. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you'll join us next week as we dive into one of the most remarkable reigns in Roman history, the reign of Justinian and Theodora.
Wow. Love this channel. Go subscribe to Extra History. It gives such an interesting perspective on just certain parts of history, which is just, I don't know, for lack of a better word, interesting, right? You get into these strategical videos and you get into these political videos and whatnot, but Extra History is kind of like it's like an oversimplified, but it's a different taste. It's like not Mexican food, it's Chinese food. I don't know if that's probably the worst metaphors I've ever came up with in my life, but you know what I'm saying. It's like a different flavor of oversimplified, but it's more enriched in some parts, especially in stuff like this video, the cap off, the lies, which, you know, reacting to something like this, it's important because um I want to make sure I hit the whole point of it. I'm not just gonna react to the most popular videos on the internet, like oversimplified. I want to react to things that deserve reactions, things that deserve uh, understanding, and that's the point of this channel. Just as we cap off this video, you guys maybe are new or haven't heard this in a while. Of course, this point of this channel is to absorb history, and it's not meant to be like a content machine of, you know, we're just going to react to the most important things or the biggest videos. We're going to soak up all history. We're going to collectively be on this journey together. So yeah, guys, as I cap that off, let me know some video suggestions down below. Is there a specific extra history series that's just important for us to react to? Is there something around the Zulu Empire that would be great to react to? Is there something around South Africa or Africa in general? Right below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bye bye.